Hey everybody, welcome to Beyond Quest with Reck. I've got Steve Harthun. Is it Harthun? I should have
Yep.
asked before. Yeah, Harthun on the show. I I should have asked, and I never do. Well,
You got it
Steve,
right.
welcome. Yeah, good. Well, welcome to the show. I just want to do a shout out to Keith for recommending you to me. Love Keith. And he was like right on. We've been chit chatting for the last 20 minutes or so, just getting to know each other, and yeah, I can already tell we're gonna be friends, Steve. So yeah.
Cool.
So Steve's written the series Ashes of Vaeltharion.
Vaeltharion.
Um, Vaeltharion. Okay,
Yep.
see, I knew I was gonna get one of these wrong. Vaeltharion. Um, and the first book is Burden of Fate. Um,
Yep.
and I'm just gonna give just a little bit of overview of the book, just so people kind of know what we're talking about. And if you've read it, great. Hey Gary, thanks for joining. Hey Jen, glad everybody could be on here. Um, okay, so Ashes of Vaeltharion.
Yeah.
Vaeltharion. Yep. Follows Trace, he's a drunk and he's a former army ranger from Kentucky, that gets portaled into the new world as a champion. And it's one of those things where they do this elaborate spell, they portal in the champion, and they're like something goes wrong with the spell, and they get this drunk from Kentucky, and they're like, "What?"
Yep.
Hey, Thomas, thanks for joining. After an initial disappointing evaluation, they decide the summoning spell didn't work correctly, and they just kind of toss Trace out into the world to fend for himself. Um, I've been reading the book for the last couple of days, and it's a lot of what the lit RPG audiences crave. It's got this grim, dark kind of main character with this harsh, grindy training montage, with like desperate, like themed dungeons full of progression and loot and new monsters. Like it's just like if you like lit RPG, you're gonna like this book. Um, and it also has this layer of the main character is kind of battling his addiction to alcohol and trying to figure out his place in the world and like why he keeps getting up every day. Working with this really kind of sadistic trainer. So yeah. it's
Yeah.
it's it's kind of awkward to say it's fun, but it is a lot of fun. There's a lot of progression and like satisfying, just you know, like movement in the story. Yeah, and so we're gonna get into it. We got everybody's popping on. Hey, Kristen, thanks for joining. Um, yeah, welcome everybody. So, Steve, um, sounds like you're going to a couple. You're going to at least a con this year, maybe. How would you like people to refer to you when they come up to you? Sir Author,
Just Steve. Plain old
Steve,
Steve. That's what
plain old.
everybody calls me. Friends, family, everyone else. Plain old Steve.
Okay, yeah, easy enough. We'll call you
Yeah.
Steve. Um, so let's get into it. We're gonna talk a little bit about the book first, then we'll get into your journey as a writer and
Okay.
everything. So Trace is the main character. What a character! Can you tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind him? And he's just this gritty, gritty guy that's been through hell on Earth and now is going through hell on this other world. What
Yeah.
gets him up in the day? What was his inspiration? And please tell me this isn't a self-insert because then I think I can give you a hug.
No, it's not a self insert. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Mm, I think I lost you.
sorry, no, my video alert for a second.
Okay,
So
let's
there's a lot about Trace that is a culmination of people throughout my life, and so I grew up in a really small town in Kentucky, out in the middle of nowhere, right? And so to put in perspective, a Walmart was an hour away. The only fast food restaurant was a Druthers. There was nothing.
yeah, no,
And
no.
so growing up out in the country, I had a lot of different friends, a lot of people who retired out of the military that they're, kids I played with, we were friends. Like my next door neighbor, he retired from special forces in the military. So there's a lot of, things there that really inspired me for the main character's core. But then, Trace, you got to understand who Trace was. So Trace was abandoned basically at birth, right? He grew up in a foster care system, had a lot of friends in the foster care system in Kentucky growing up, and I seen the good and the bad of that foster care. Some of them were great. The people really loved their children, and took care of them. Some of them you were basically extra money, right? You get as many children as you could so you get more money. And so Trace comes from that side of the tracks, right? He really wasn't cared for. He had a really hard time growing up, being passed from foster child to foster child. And then when he got to age out at 18, where I grew up, you had one of a couple choices, right? One, you could try to go off to a college somewhere if they, you could find one to accept you,
Yeah,
or
the
you could,
grades and stuff. Yeah.
yep, or you could go work on a farm because there really wasn't any industry otherwise, or you could join the military. Those are basically your escapes that most people went with. And so in this case, Chase joins the military. Now he's had no real family or anything, so he goes into the army, and then he ends up going to RASP, which is Ranger School, or Ranger Selection, and then he goes to Ranger School later, and that's where he finds his first real family, right? And that's his brothers; they become his family. When they're on deployment overseas, their helicopter gets shot down, and all of his basically family dies,
Hmm.
right? And so through the trauma of all that and the PTSD and all that, Trace ultimately washes out of the military, ends up back in Kentucky in his rented trailer, and he gets up every day, goes to work, doing construction, drinks himself to sleep every night. And there's an inner part of him that's like, I can't die, right? He doesn't know how to die. So the
Yeah.
guy's just basically drinking himself to death every day, and living with extreme PTSD and all that. And then, so as the story goes, he ends up getting portaled to another world. And the one key element that I want to point out that was so interesting is that when he gets portaled, the system evaluates him and determines, due to his alcohol concentration level, it makes him immune to all toxins and poisons.
Hmm.
So now you got a guy who drinks every day, all day, forced sober,
Who is suddenly immune to the effects of
suddenly
alcohol.
immune to the
Yeah.
effects of
Yeah,
alcohol.
it's actually kind of a genius, like, way to deal with addiction, right? Because
Yep.
he still wants to drink, but it doesn't do anything for him. Now
Yeah.
he's gotta kinda deal with all of these feelings that he's just been repressing for years,
Yep.
right?
So
Yeah.
you got this guy who's very upset. Now he can't drink. Now he has to deal with all the fallout of being forced sober into this world where they pretty much treat him like he was when he was growing up, and they throw him out. And now he's got extreme PTSD and all that. And he goes from there. So I know that was a long answer, but basically it's a lot of different things I witnessed. Watching how alcoholism works and different addictions and stuff, growing up through my life, and things that I've seen and experienced, that all comes together to form this character. And then the question is when when the lights are off and you're laying there in your own thoughts, you know what's that like, and what's that like for someone who's been through that level of trauma, and and how do they get themselves out of it in the end?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hopefully, if you're listening, you get the grim narc nature of where this character comes from, because he comes from this really dark place, and you sit there with him, with a lot of these, like, feelings he has about the world. And like, when he is shaking in the middle of the night, like, you're sitting there with him as a character, and it's just a really powerful story. Yeah. Let's talk about his powers a little bit. He's got some unique powers. We don't want to give too much away, but I think
Yeah.
we can say, like, he ends up becoming, like, kind of a spear guy, like a spear master sort of
Correct.
build.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So to tell you a little bit about the world, the system, I didn't want to be boxed into having like classes and stuff like that, right? Also, this is my first lit RPG. Yeah, I had enough spreadsheets as it was, right? So I didn't want to get too crazy and too complicated with it. So the one thing that I did is I said, okay, basically there's a level cap of 30, and then like every 10 levels is like a tier, right? There's a
Hmm.
tier system. And so inside of that tier system, like every 10 levels, you get 2 spell slots, and you get like 2 ability slots. Skills are something that the system recognizes that you're an expert at and grants. Otherwise, you don't get skills. Right? There's no way to like you can't go pick up a scroll or something to gain a skill in this world.
Yeah.
Skills are only earned. But so what happens is with those spell slots and with those ability slots, you can build yourself into whatever you want. And as you meet other characters in the book, you realize some people gravitate towards what we would call a tank, right? So they take defensive type spells and abilities, or they're a healer, so they take healing type spells and abilities. Trace in this case would be a traditional DPSer, but he uses a spear as his main weapon.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really like how we're gonna get into the system a little bit, but the spells, abilities, skills, that differentiation is really
Mhm.
well done, and it allows you to have kind of magical progress even as a fighter. You get spells
Mhm.
and these abilities that make you kind of a spell sword or spell spear, where you
Correct.
can do a little
Yeah.
bit more than just poke things, right?
Exactly.
Poke
Yep.
things better or whatever. Yeah. Yeah. So Gary has a question for you. He is asking about, does this have an Audible? And I know you're working on that. What's the plan for it coming out in audio?
So Audible production completed today. So
Mm.
right now it's in the Audible 4 steps of I
Yeah, it's
hope
got
it's
the
10
quality
days, but
check and
not
stuff.
not
Yeah.
3 weeks stuck. So it's there. So basically it's ready. We're just waiting for Audible to approve it and put it online and
Yeah.
it'll be available.
That's great. So
Yep.
Gary, any minute, day now, it's
Yeah.
gonna be live. Who's who's your narrator? Who did you
uh,
get?
Ken Finettis.
Yeah.
He's kind of new to lit RPG realm,
Mhm.
so he's done a lot of other big authors outside of this genre, and I was able to do a deal where I think he's kind of wanting to get into lit RPG, and so I was able to work something out with him. So it's kind of like my debut, his debut, but he has that you know gruff, dark,
The kind of
almost
rumbly voice.
yeah,
Yeah.
sort of. I have to give him credit, and there's some characters in the book that it blew me away when I heard how he did them. There's just
Yeah.
like Perry's a good one. Perry you will be beside yourself when you hear Perry in
I'm
the book.
excited to
But
hear Perry. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah. So he's done some good work, and yeah. So he finished. So it's all done.
Yeah. That's exciting. Okay. So you're just waiting for it to go through. So it should be any
Yep.
day now. So that's exciting. Yeah. Okay, so main character wise, Trace has gains quite a few levels in book one. And he gains some abilities and spells, and he's got some skills just from life, like
hmm
the anti-poison
Yeah,
skills.
foraging, some
Yeah.
basic stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do you have his progression mapped out for like the because this going to be a series, right? Do you have his progression mapped out for the series, or are you kind of mapping it out as you go? What does that look like for you?
So I am a plotter through and through. Everything for the whole series is mapped out.
Okay.
And I got some advice one time when I started to write the series. Somebody said, go write the ending first. So I sat down and I wrote the epilogue and the final chapter of the entire series. I wrote that out and put that aside. And basically, I've been working toward that from the beginning to the end
Okay.
now.
I
So,
Yeah. So I interview a lot of lit RPG authors, and most of them are pantsers, and they don't have it plotted out. And I will say that in reading your book, I could tell. I was like, I would put money that you're a plotter because it's just like your progression just makes sense. It's
yeah.
very, you know, linear and in a satisfying way as far as like how
Yeah.
where his powers are going and what that looks like. Yeah.
Yeah, I have, if you've seen my stack of spreadsheets, you might be scared. I actually went
Probably.
through at one point and I was like, okay, I mapped out all his spells, abilities, everything he's going to have, all of his gear for the entire series, and put in all formulas. And so it actually makes it easy because when I do some kind of recap, right, at some point throughout the book, which
Mhm.
I try not to do very often, but whenever I do a recap, I just go to my sheet and I verify, put the math in, and it's done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and this book it's a little bit on the crunchier side, as well. And for those of you who are new to lit RPG, crunchier means like more stats and things. So, there's these moments where, um, he kills things and you get, I think, I've read a couple books lately. I think you get experience, right, for
You
each of
do.
your
You get
kills. Yeah, you
experience.
get
You do.
experience for each of your kills, and you're trying to work up to a threshold. And every 5 levels, those thresholds kind of grow pretty
Correct.
significantly, right?
Yep.
And so you have to fight stronger monsters and stuff. But what he doesn't do, and I enjoy this about your book, Steve, is you're not like somebody gets hit and they lose 25 health points. It's not like
Yeah.
it's not like that,
No.
right? It's more of like on the progress side of like, oh, you killed 4 hellhounds, and each hellhound is 25 experience, and so, yeah, 100 experience points.
Correct.
More on that side of things, right? So
Yeah, and I tried to summarize that too. I tried
mhm.
to summarize it because I don't like it like
Yeah.
just me personally. If you kill 45 things and you have 45 line items, right? So what I
Yes.
did is you kill 5 spiders, right? There'd be spider 15 XP times 5, right?
Mhm.
And give you the total. So instead of
Yeah,
giving
which
you
your
a line
narrator
item.
thanks you for that. There's nothing worse than
Yeah.
saying,
Yeah.
spider killed, spider killed.
Yeah,
So,
exactly right. Yeah.
yeah. Yep, exactly. All right. So, um you've obviously kind of, if you're listening, we've talked about how the addiction is woven into the book. Um, so Trace has got this like mix of trauma. He's numbed it with addiction. In our world, he's just kind of getting up and going to work. And he has this thing about how, he doesn't he wouldn't act he is not gonna like actively kill himself because he feels like he's living for his family that's died, kind of. But
Cool.
also he's not really living. He's kind of in this limbo where he's just kind of numbing himself a lot. Um and um he's losing his in the new world, he's kind of lost his coping mechanism to numb everything, but he still reaches for the bottle. He still feels the urge to drink, and he does a lot of like breathing and um you know
Yep.
like sweats it out in a lot of respects. Like he does a lot of things to try to distract himself from his addiction. um let's talk about that a little bit. So
Okay. Yeah.
yeah, so you said you had some inspiration just watching people that are
Yes,
growing up.
I've watched people deal with alcoholism and addictions and gambling addictions and different stuff, right? Which so Trace, so there's kind of a trifecta for Trace, right?
Mhm.
So there's the alcoholism that you see actively going on at the beginning of the book into it. There's a gambling addiction, which he leans into a little bit. He really doesn't address it, although there is a gambling hall in the book for, and then there's the
Mhm.
PTSD aspect of
Yeah.
Trace, right? So my intent is for book one, I wanted to kind of try to deal with most of the alcoholism, right? Because he's forced to be sober. He's
Yeah.
forced to so and then later books we'll get into the PTSD and stuff like that. Like there's a scene in book one where he can't fly. So if he gets on any kind of griffin or any type of thing that flies, his PTSD is so bad, he takes like a massive debuff from the system. So, if there ever comes a point where it's critical that he flies, he can't right now.
Well, and that scene was particularly impactful because he basically falls off this flying creature, right? And
Yeah.
the trainer, who has really been merciless this whole time, just looks at him and is like, "Okay, we're gonna take a horse." Like he doesn't
Yeah.
he gives him like zero shit about it, and it's
Yeah.
like it's noticeable. He's like, "Okay, this is like a serious. This guy has no control over this."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Braun is he's a mess. He's a
yeah.
mess. So, yeah. But yeah. Yeah. So, throughout the series, and I don't want to get into because there's some major plot points in later books
Hmm.
that deal with the addiction and stuff. But the story is also a story of redemption for him and his addictions and how he ultimately is going to deal with them and how the smallest thing can cause regression or can cause him to flashback or with his PTSD or start shaking, wanting to, and he carries a bourbon bottle around with him, also in the story. And I can't give away some. There's something in book two that's going to really hone in on what's going on there, and I think that, and I'll give you one quote that Trace says in book two, and he's talking about becoming strong and powerful and being able to fight and being able to kill and and deal with all this. And he's talking to another person. The person says to him, they're like, "Well, you're just so good at all this." And Trace says, "Well, sometimes we're just broken in useful ways." When he tells them that, because he's like, this isn't no superpower that you're seeing here. I'm just broken that way,
Hmm.
right? He goes, and it's not a good thing. It's a
Yeah.
really interesting. So he knows, and that's the thing about him. He knows, and just to go back a little bit, where you're talking about, Trace is the kind of guy who's laying there and he's on rock bottom, and he knows he's on rock bottom, but he's incapable of giving up, right? It's been so ingrained into him that he must survive at all at all costs. He has to survive. So he can't. he can't give up. So he has nothing, even thrown into this, you think about it, if I was him and thrown into this new world and the things that they do to him in this new world right off the bat, right, I would have
Mhm.
been done right there. I've been
Yeah.
crawled up, yeah, we're done. Yeah, no, but he doesn't know any better, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, there's a lot of like transference of like trauma, right? Like he
Yeah.
tries to drink himself to numb himself, and then he doesn't have that, so then he like works himself to death to try to numb it. And
Yep.
yeah, that's the broken in a useful way.
Yeah,
Definitely
exactly.
resonates.
Exactly
Yeah,
right.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Well, okay. So let's switch tactics here a little bit.
Okay.
Later in the book, he gets a party, and he's got it's a very well-rounded, kind of traditional RPG party, right? So you've got Trace, who's the DPS. You've got a tank with a tower shield, which I haven't read a tower shield since probably like Dungeonborn days with
Yeah.
Dakota Crouch series, right? But it was a very satisfying tower shield tank. You've got a healer and then an archer ranger type. It's a nice balanced party. What were your considerations when like crafting that and building it? And you know, yeah.
Yeah. So I was a big EverQuest player, big World of Warcraft player, right? RPG games in my younger part of life. So I always had that balanced party mindset, right? And I knew at some point Trace would need support, right? He would need family because it's the one thing that's probably going to help him heal the most over time, right? So what I wanted to do was bring in some type of family dynamic. So he meets Lyora early in the book. I don't want to get into the plot too much, but she's basically like his little sister,
Hmm.
and she's a healer. And then he starts collecting these people along the way that that are people that are basically of the same caliber or level as him as far as skill set. And he's like, hey, we can get together and we can make this party because we can do advanced dungeons,
Yeah.
et cetera, right? And that's his mindset going into it. And so, but the roundedness is just more of being logical, playing RPG games and stuff. And that's why I knew he would be a DPSer, meaning Trace,
Yeah.
right? And then so, yeah, but that's basically it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it works, and the party dynamics and them fighting, you can tell that you've played some video games in your
Yeah,
time and
yeah.
thought about it. Yeah. Yeah, because the
Oh,
tactics are really good. Yeah.
the worst part is me forgetting about spells. And I'll be like, well, Trace is pinned against this. And I'm like, yeah, he's got a blink ability. What am I doing? Or
Mhm.
shadow step, I call it. So yeah, a lot of it is to me, it's the party thing was actually harder to write the choreography, right? Because now I've got like all these people and who would do what, and some are better than others at doing certain stuff. And
Yeah,
yeah,
who do we focus on in this moment? And I think,
yeah.
with your dungeons and stuff, so there's one dungeon in particular that the party tackles, and
Mhm.
the dungeon is kind of this, like 5-part dungeon, and 4 of the different
Yeah,
parts focus on a different, like ice versus fire, like
right.
sort of
Yeah.
different elemental elements. And so then it really plays to different character strengths within the party, which is fun too, because they get to show off in different ways. So,
Yeah, the poison one was really cool because Trace basically gets to carry the party in that one
mhm.
because he's immune.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
When
he's
I
like, "You guys just stay there on that hill. I'll go into the death
exactly, I'll
fog,
take care
and
of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
got
he
it."
actually plays it up a little bit like that to him. He
Yeah.
kind of messes with them. Yeah. So the dungeons, I try to make them all unique. Right, even in like when you get into later books, I have puzzle dungeons. I have all different kinds of dungeons, right? Because there's only so many times you can walk in, you can slaughter everything, and you can walk out. You
Mhm.
know, so I try to come up with different ideas for different dungeons, and I call back on my World of Warcraft or EverQuest days and say, what was a dungeon mechanic that I really liked,
Mhm.
without getting it to be too crazy.
Yeah, the first dungeon really made me think of, WoW on the was it the Argent Crusade? It's like, "Oh, I think I might have
Yeah,
played this dun"
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
The monastery one.
Yeah, the monastery
Yeah, it
one,
kind of
yeah.
has the.
Oh,
Somebody else mentioned that to me later when I did it. I kind of just went through it and did it, and then somebody goes, "Oh, this reminds me of World of Warcraft's monastery dungeon or whatever it
Mhm.
was called." And I
Yeah.
say, "Yeah, I guess it does."
A little bit, but I mean,
Yeah,
in a unique, it's its own beast. But it actually,
yeah,
reading it, I was like, I had the warm and fuzzies because I remembered playing it, when I
yeah,
was
yeah,
playing World of
yeah.
Warcraft. Yeah, yeah. So okay, well, here's a question I'm starting to ask everybody because I do want to know what is your favorite thing about your book yourself? Like, what do you like about it the most?
So I have to give away not a secret about the book with the thing. So when I was growing up, I took martial arts. Okay, and
Hmm.
I started learning a martial arts system called Pakwa. And I probably pronounced it incorrectly because I'm from Kentucky. But the martial arts system is based on circles, right? So it doesn't deal with when force comes at you, you redirect. It's kind of like we used to do these exercises where my martial art instructor put like a lawn chair out there and you had to walk circles around it and stuff like that, right? So this martial arts system I learned as a kid, I basically reverse engineered the entire martial arts system for the eightfold spear path system for the book. So the whole martial arts system that he learns was a martial arts system I learned when I was young. And so I
Hmm.
basically reverse engineered it into the book. And so when he does more of the circles, right, you'll find the very if you happen to have studied that martial art, there will be some very unique, oh
You'll be
wow, really,
recognizing it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you'll recognize the elements of it. So to me, that's at a very personal level of the book that no one knows, but that was something I thought was really cool that I did that I really enjoyed. And then the other part of it is this Trace, right? Trace being the ultimate underdog, right? And I didn't want him to come into this new world and just be an automatic winner because of his training and combat skills. Because one thing I thought is how many Army Rangers fought with a sword?
Hmm.
None. You're right. Well, probably none. How many have used a spear? How many of you? It's just not going to be equal. Now, small group tactics, yes, he might have advantage there. Being able to forage in the wilderness and stay alive and track and things like that, absolutely. And I play into those strengths from him for his past. But being able to come in and just fight with medieval weapons is just going to be a no go, right?
Yeah, I actually found that kind of refreshing because a lot of times when you get the, ex-army guy comes into New World, he immediately like knows how to hit people with a sword. Like, I mean, it's just like
Yeah.
you're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
But you really are like, he gets the crap kicked out of him because he can't like
He
compete
gets
with these people right out of the gate. And I thought, like I said, I thought that was really refreshing. Because he really doesn't, his military, whatever he learned in the military as a ranger doesn't really translate to this world hardly at all.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
There's a few you'll pick up on subtle things. Actually, in book two, he has some callbacks to going to seer school and survival schools and stuff like that,
Mhm.
right? That he mentions and talks about. But those are in later books. In book one, I tried to make it, but because it's not a story about the military, right? It's
Mhm.
not about his life as in the military. It's about him in this new world and where he is today. Now there are skills and things that are useful to him, but for the most part, most of it's not, right? He makes a funny reference. I think it's in the beatdown you're talking about. It may be in the a beatdown later because he gets multiple
He gets beat
beatdowns.
down a few
Yeah.
times. Yeah, yeah.
But in one of the beatdowns, he makes a comment, says, if I had a rifle, this would be a different game right now,
Hmm.
but he alludes to that a little bit. But for the most part, yeah, most of his experience. Now, I think some of his small squad tactics type stuff, right, do play in later. That or he's a good leader. He's good at
Yeah,
leading. He's good at coordinating with his team, and he's naturally the leader of the group,
yeah,
right? Um,
yeah. Which is also kind of funny because he's also got all this trauma about the last group that he was with in the military, right?
right.
So it plays off of each other that even though this is a strength for him, it's also a
Yeah.
pain.
It
Yeah,
is. It's rubbing a raw sore
yeah.
constantly for him. And you see a lot of the flashbacks and stuff he deals with, it's just and there's just crazy moments that happen and then he's all of a sudden like dazed for 5 seconds, stuck in his own head about, what do I do? And
Hmm.
that's weird to see for someone who's always in action. He's
Yeah,
always moving forward and all of a sudden he can't.
yeah. So my favorite part, and this is gonna sound weird because there's a lot of like good things, like all the things that you've listed are really good. But I think
Sure.
one of the things that we haven't hit on that's one of my favorite things about your book is the prose itself. Like you have this way of like focusing in on details that make the character, the world, what he's going through seem a lot grittier and a lot realer.
Yeah.
I want to talk to Steve because I think he's got the heart of a poet. Like you really have this way of structuring your prose in a way that makes the world just feel more lived in. So I want to give you, kudos to that because you do a really good
Thank you.
job. Yeah.
It's funny is as the book goes on, I don't to me I felt like I didn't really find my voice in the book until like the latter half of the book or the back side of the book. And
Mhm.
I find, and when you go back and read your own work, you're always like, cringe,
Yeah.
and I read some of it and I'm like, yeah, I was trying to be Tolkien, I thought I was, Tolkien there for a minute and then I realized I wasn't.
Yeah.
But yeah, I tried to be. I want you to, and I guess I don't know if it's an odd way of saying it. I want you to smell, feel, taste the world you're in, right? And because the book is the we talked about before, the prologues and epilogues are from other people's point of view, but the main story is close third person to
Mhm.
Trace, right? So you're always with Trace. And you're kind of like, I imagine like a ball floating above Trace's head behind him, right? And that's your point of view to the world when you're dealing with him. And I think it's really important you understand what's going on in the world from a intellectual point of view, but
Yeah.
from a this is gritty, right? This is down and dirty. This is not, and I joke a lot about it in my social media stuff, right? This isn't, this isn't mom and dad's lit RPG, right? It's tough. This guy's going to
Mhm.
go through some stuff. It's not going to be good. I actually had a review. Somebody posted a review and said, "This is the saddest story I've ever read." And he gave me 1 star, man. I'm like, come
Yeah.
on, it should have been 5 stars for if
Yeah.
it
If I
made you
make
feel
you
that impact.
cry, you owe me 5 stars.
Exactly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Man, if I make you cry, give me 5 stars.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, it's funny.
Yeah, no, I liked the how you read it and the prose that you used and just yeah, it keeps it real. So we're gonna get into some of the like crafting sort of questions, but if you've got a
Uh-huh.
question for Steve, you guys go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll get into it. Um, and yeah, well, I'll weave your questions in here too. So go ahead and add your questions into the chat. Um, so Steve, we talked a little bit about the system. And like I said, it seems pretty planned. You've admitted that it's planned out.
Yeah.
Um, how many spreadsheets do you have to track all of this? Like, how do you keep track of all of the bits and bobs of your system?
So I do cheat a little bit because no, you Trace doesn't see anybody else's sheets or,
Yes.
or
Yeah. Okay. So
alerts and
you're
stuff.
not keeping track of everybody
So
else's.
I only gotta keep track. Well, I do keep track of levels for the other team members,
Yeah.
right? So I keep track of their levels so that you can kind of see where everybody is from a level point of view. But in the beginning, I was tracking everybody, and it was too much. And then I
Hmm.
thought about, well, Trace, unless they tell Trace, he's not going to know.
How do you know? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a character in book 2 that's a new character that comes along that's involved with Trace, and I run into that very thing because my editor would tell me, "You're breaking point of view. You're breaking point of view. You're breaking
Hmm.
point of view." Right? And I'm like, "Oh yeah, because this is only Trace's point of view." Right?
Yeah.
So I have to have the characters tell him what's going on. I'm actually not the best about that in book 1. I kind of really locked in on making that right in book 2. But so really, I only keep up with Trace and all his stats. And like I said, I built out. I have my main spreadsheet has about 40 tabs. I want to say, yeah, it's insane. But
Yeah.
and there are tabs that's like the main tabs. There's a tab for every level for Trace. There's
Yeah.
a tab for his gear. And I have all, if you've seen all the cross formulas that go across all the different stuff. And then he gets growth type items, we'll just say it like that, the increase. One of the worst things I did for myself is one of the spells he gets for every level reduces the cooldown of the spell. Now the
Hmm.
cooldown like starts off as like 24 hours or something crazy, right? So, but I want to get that down to a time he's of a higher level that it's a reasonable cooldown. So now, like every time he levels, I gotta be like, all right, he gets a storage slot. He gets he get this
Hmm.
cooldown comes down by an hour. So So yeah, this is a lot of spreadsheet stuff, but I did create a lot of formulas to try to keep up with it, as it goes.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it makes sense. That's 40 tabs is a lot. I could see why you only keep track of trace. I mean, in
Yeah,
the book, obviously you have to keep everybody else's level up. There's moments where um some of the other characters end up getting a spell or an ability, and so it's
correct.
like it's got to be transparent. But there's also these moments where, like, I think it was Amara um has like an archer ability or two that she kind of keeps to herself
Yeah, they
and then
all.
surprises everybody.
Correct. Yeah, they
Yeah.
all have secrets. They
Hmm.
kind of joke about it, but yeah, each of the characters kind of, because they're, for lack of better words, right? They're a pickup group, right? Ultimately,
Yeah.
and to be kind of funny, they're all kind of like rejects in their own kind of way. Like,
Hmm.
Ronan's got a really interesting backstory that hasn't been revealed, so I can't tell you what it is yet. But he's basically why he comes off as kind of this wealthy kid that's out there on his own, and
Yeah.
and him and Trace become friends. Laura's, she's freshly minted out of healing
Healer
school,
school.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you want to call it that, right? Amara lost her twin, so she's out, just wants revenge,
Hmm.
so their group is, just kind of a ragtag group that kind of finds each other and forms, and they just happen to be well balanced in doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, a little bit of plot. Although, I mean, I think it's one of those things where if somebody had come into that group and it wasn't balanced, he would have just been like, not interested in you being a part of this group. But
It
yeah.
happens.
Hmm. So, in the pre-show, you told me that you have a full-time job, and it sounds like it's a pretty intense full-time job. How do you balance writing and working in your life? How
Yeah,
do you keep? I mean, you've written book two now, and like half the time that you wrote book one. So
right.
how are you doing this?
So when I got into it, so it's like a lot of things. Some in December 31st, 2024, my wife retired. Company she worked for offered her a buyout. She was able to retire, and we sat down. We talked about what we wanted to do. We have 8 children together, so
Hmm.
we have 8 kids, and we have 9 grandbabies. Some a couple of our daughters are pregnant, so they're on the way. But we have like nine
Yeah.
grandchildren, right? So we have very full lives to begin with. And then we were financially able for her to retire and be able to spend time with grandchildren, do the things she wants. So when this came about, I told my wife, I said, I'm 4 years away from retiring. I'd like to start building up a writing career, and I'd like to write lit RPG and all that. So I got her buy-in, and part of it, what I said is every night for 1 to 2 hours, I'm gonna have blocked out time, because here's the deal: you're never going to find time. I always say it's either a priority or it's not, right? So I said this has to be a priority. I'm going to set the time aside. I'm going to block out the time every night, within reason. There might be things going on, but within reason. And so I'm going to work on my writing stuff. So in the beginning, that was just purely writing, right? I was just writing, 2 hours. Sometimes I'd go longer if I was in, really going. I felt like 2 hours is about long enough. After that, I started second guessing myself and all that.
Hmm.
So I'd write about 2 hour sprints and then stop. So then once I got back, like book one written, and then I started doing like all the getting the social media stuff going, getting the website built. But I just fit everything into that 2 hours every night, and it's just become consistency. And I think that's the key. Once you become consistent with it, right? It's amazing amount of work you can, push out
You
if
can
you know
accomplish. Yeah.
you can accomplish a lot if you're just constantly every day, just as little as 2 hours. That's what I'm going to do. And so I've done that for about a year now, right? And so I wrote this first book. I've got second book written here that is actually coming back from the editor this week. I
Hmm.
wrote a different book. It's a nonfiction book. So as you might have noticed from Trace, Trace is big into gambling, and he always plays craps, the dice game
Yeah.
craps.
Yeah.
I have a 12-foot craps table in my basement. So we play every week here. Um, my basement sign is called Shady Pine. If you notice,
Nice.
casino in the book is called
Yeah.
Shady Pine. So that's no joke. There's a complete inside joke to all that. So I actually wrote a nonfiction book on the game craps, like my point of view, how to play all that. That's coming out in June. But just to show you in that 2 hour window, what I just, now that I'm really focused on it, it's basically a habit now. right?
Mhm.
I'm constantly, oh, it's time, and I go, and the
Like
juices
everything
flow.
else turns
Yep,
off and you're
and I
like,
do
this
it,
is
and
very focused. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just I program myself to do that. And sometimes I go more. So like on a weekend, I might say, okay, I'm going to divide my time up, but I always keep my writing time separate from my other time. Right. Like if I know I'm going to write that night, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to use the whole time for writing. Right. Because if I'm going to do website stuff or social media or work on something else, I'll kind of break that time up. But my writing time, I don't interrupt with other tasks. Right. And I'm able to, when I do, focus writing time, I'm able to produce quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I do it that
That's
way.
awesome. That's awesome. I think that messaging is really important for people. There's a lot of folks that want to write a book,
Yeah.
and are toying with the idea of writing a book and stuff. And enjoy talking to people about like, well, how did you do it? Because you know, jobs take up a lot of energy, family takes up a lot of energy,
It does.
but yet everybody's finding, not everybody, but a lot of people are finding ways to do it. And yeah, I like it. 2 hours focus. So my 2 hours used to be when the kids were little, it was like 8 to 10 or 9 to 11 or whatever. It was like the kids went to bed. I would have like 2 hours. My spouse was, early to bed, and I'd have these like 2 hours in the middle of the night that I would just write or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's consistency to me. It's what, I've just always found if you make it a priority and you're consistent with it, you'll get results.
Hmm. So book two's already in edits, it sounds like.
Mhm.
Is do you have a projected, I mean, it sounds like you've got everything planned out. How many books are going to be in this series?
So that's the crazy part for this. The lit RPG is 4 books. There's only going to
Okay.
be 4 books to the lit RPG. Now, I guess I'm getting ready to publicly say what I'm doing because I'll go ahead and break it out. So, chapter 1, Trace goes out into the alley at the end of chapter 1 and passes out. He's drunk basically. Gets in a bar fight, kicked out, goes out in the alley and passes out. Chapter 2, Trace wakes up in, Vaeltharion, the whole storyline. When I'm done with the lit RPG series, I'm going to go back. I'm going to write a new book. It's going to have the exact same chapter 1, except for Trace wakes up in the alley covered in blood, and the people that he got in the bar fight with have been murdered, and he's immediately arrested. It's going to kick off a 4 book. Think of more like Jack Reacher style,
Oh,
completely
that's,
different genre,
yeah,
4 books with the same main character. So
dun
it's going to
dun dun.
be, yeah, so it's going to be him dealing with his PTSD and alcoholism and all his addictions, but in modern times, and a more like a spy thriller type series, but it's the same character.
Does he bring any of his powers and stuff to the real world or
Nope.
no? Okay, so
It's
he just
just
starts.
it's like he just woke up. Yeah, it's gonna be completely be more spy mystery type. So it
Yeah,
won't be the fantasy realm at all, but
yeah.
it'll be the same character crossed over into like a spy thriller type series.
Huh.
Just something I wanted to do. And then I want when that series is done, it'll be 4 books. And then I want to do a 3 book prequel. And the 3 book prequel will be a different genre now, but it will be him going to ranger school, becoming a ranger, and getting to rock bottom so that the last chapter of the 3 book prequel will be the first chapter of where he's at the bar in the other two
Okay.
books.
Yeah.
So they all 3 connect into 2 different parallel worlds with the same prequel. So it ends up being 11 books with the same main character in 3 different genres.
That's wild. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's gonna be exciting. I haven't really seen. Has anybody done this that you've
Not that
read
I
or?
know of.
Yeah, no. It seems
which
like
which
a.
is why it's funny. I'm like I'm telling everybody, and somebody will go do it now.
All right.
But yeah,
Yeah. No, that's really ambitious. Yeah, love it. Hmm.
yeah,
That's exciting too. I think this is your first book that you've put out, right?
yep,
And I think that it's interesting because I kind of did the opposite of you, where knew I wanted to write lit RPG, but I wrote 2 sci-fis and a fantasy, like a cozy fantasy, and then worked my
yeah,
way up to a lit RPG, where you're kind
yeah,
of doing the opposite. But it's one of those things that just because you might want to write in a genre or be good at a genre or whatever, it doesn't mean that that's like I think a lot of people limit, like, I'm a lit RPG writer and that's all I'm going to do, or a
yeah,
cozy fantasy writer or whatever. Yeah, I like that you're going to
yeah.
stretch your writing wings.
And I
Yeah.
think that it's funny. So the lit RPG, right? I've listened to so much of it and played video games and stuff like that. So I leaned into that element to write in that genre.
Mhm.
The more spy, action series, that'll be a completely different thing for me, right? I have to use different skills and life
Yeah, you're gonna have to do
experiences,
some research, yeah.
yeah, and stuff like that in order to write that genre, right? And all that. So it's one of those things where I'll have to, do something different. Now, I do plan to continue lit RPG in general after this series, but I also wanted my first series not to be like an endless 20 book series or anything
Yeah.
like that, right? I wanted to write like 4 books. Actually, originally it was going to be 3 books.
Ooh, looks like we lost you a little bit there.
Sorry, I don't know why
Yeah,
I did
that's
that.
okay.
But when I mapped it out, it ended up being 4 books. So I said, okay, I don't want to stuff too much into 3 books. I really was just going to do a trilogy.
Mhm.
So then I turned it into 4 books, and that. So and then I kind of came up with the idea for the other genres. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's my plan. Is ultimately there'll be 11 books in that. But I have an idea for another lit RPG series. But I'll wait
Yeah.
and see how that one comes out.
Dun dun dun. At some point here, you'll actually retire, and then you'll be like, "I'm writing a spy novel with this hand, and another little RPG series with this hand." And
I lost sound
oh,
for some reason.
can you hear me now?
Can you can you
I
hear
can
me?
I can hear you. Yes. Can you hear me? Are you there?
What am I?
Technical difficulties, you guys. Just be a little patient while we figure this out.
Hmm.
Can you hear me now, Steve? If you've got any questions for Steve or I, go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll make sure to get it to him. We got a few last questions for Steve, and hopefully when he comes back, we've got sound working and we'll be able to wrap everything up for tonight. Okay. Yeah, but the problem is, I'm glad you guys can hear us, but the problem is,
Okay.
okay.
There
Can
we
you
go.
hear me? Yeah,
Yeah, I
okay.
can hear you now.
Yeah.
It completely glitched out and like froze on me. So I
Yeah.
apologize for that. You're gonna have to edit that out.
Yeah, we'll edit that out. Yeah. The audience was like, "We can hear both of you." I'm like, "Yeah, but
Yeah,
Steve can't hear anything."
yeah,
Yeah.
it's really weird.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway,
But yeah, so all right. Getting back into it, we've got a question from the audience. Jen says, how did you find lit RPG? What was your gateway into lit RPG?
so it's gonna be cliche. Dungeon Crawler Carl many
Mm,
years ago, right? Somebody recommended Dungeon Crawler. I was a big audiobook fan, and it's funny because I mainly listened to like nonfiction books about military stuff like that originally on Audible. Always liked Audible. I listened to spy stuff, the other
mhm.
genres we talked about, and then Dungeon Crawler Carl came onto the scene, and I listened to the first one and I was hooked. I was like, "Oh man, this is like playing video games
Never
and all
looked
that."
back. Yeah.
6,000 hours later on Audible.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, that's been my primary thing of since then. So like currently I'm listening to Riftside 3, the third one that's came out.
Yeah.
But if you've written lit RPG, there's a good chance I've listened to at least one, if not multiples of your books, depending on the series and stuff. And it was funny at being on a lot of the Discord and the Facebook groups and stuff. I'm like, who's this person? And I go, look, oh, I've listened to like 5 of their books. It's
Uh-huh. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Well, that brings me to my next question. When we were talking, you said you're coming to lit RPG Con. Is that maybe
yep,
like
yeah,
mostly
99%
sure?
sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's super exciting. um, it's gonna be like a who's who of lit RPG. You're gonna be like,
yes,
I've
yes.
listened to your book and I've listened to
Oh
you,
yeah,
and
it's
yeah, yeah.
even Jordan Con was like that, to
Hmm.
some extent. At Jordan Con, I went to the first panel I went to. I went in, I sat down, and the panel sets down, and I look across the panel. I'm like, "Yep, listen to every one of these people." Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Georgia Con was a lot of fun. Do you have any other cons or signings or anything that you're doing this year besides?
So
Yeah.
Imagination is going to be in my hometown end of
Okay.
July. I seen that one pop up. I thought about it just because it's local, east, but that's the only. So Jordan Con and the RPG Con were the only main ones, and I'm going to be sound crazy here, I really actually don't know a lot of them, right? I'm really kind
Yeah.
of new to this scene. So I didn't know about Jordan Con until Keith mentioned it to me, and I said, "Oh, I got to
Mhm.
go." So I signed up and then I went, and then of course I heard a lot about Lit RPG Con, but yeah, I really don't know of any of the other big ones. And I've seen Imagination pop up, but I don't know how much Lit RPG they do there. I know it's more fantasy,
Mhm.
but I might go
Yeah.
to it just because it's local. Um,
Yeah, the big ones are Jordan Con, Lit RPG Con, and then Dragon Con has a big, Lit RPG
uh,
element too, but it's kind of fluctuating. And then there's a con that's popped up in like Houston, I think, that had a bunch of people. I haven't heard anybody report back yet, but they had a pretty good Lit RPG element going down there too. So
got you. Yeah.
Keith, your ears were burning. Keith joined. Hey, Keith.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Keith. So I ran into Keith online, and like Keith adopted me, I guess. And
Yeah, he's
now,
he's a friendly guy. Yeah,
yeah,
we're
he's
keeping
like,
Keith.
"Yeah,
He's
come on,
keeping us.
Steve. I'm
Yeah.
gonna. You don't know anybody? Let me take care of that for you."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Keith's a great guy.
He is a great guy. Okay, so audiobook is coming out whenever the Audible gods deem it
Yep.
sounds like it's in review. And for those that don't know, Audible does this thing where you turn in all the files and then they do a bunch of checks on it, and they don't, it could take 3 days, it could take 3 weeks, and you don't have any control over it. So whenever you're like, when's your book coming out? It's like hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Um, so it's going with them. Do you have more like, it sounds like book two's in edits. Are you planning on releasing book two or a book three this year? What is your schedule for releases for the rest of the year look like?
So book two will be around Lit RPG Con. Not specific. That just happens. It just happens to fall then. So
Hmm.
it's either gonna be the very end of June or the first week of July
Okay.
timeframe for book two. I have
And
fully mapped.
is that
Sorry.
audio, physical, digital, or is it audio?
Physical, digital, physical for sure. Audio,
Mm.
I just because we just finished. As soon as my proofreader gets done, I'm going to try to go ahead and get the audio done ahead of time so that I can drop it all at the same time.
Hmm.
So they're going to be really close. So the
Yeah.
audio and the all the other formats for book two will be real close. And then I've fully mapped out and have the first three chapters of book three written, and I had to go back because I wanted to fix a few things in my, like I said, I'm a planner. So I went back and I fully got book three ready. So now I plan over the next few months to go ahead and finish book three. And then I'm looking for probably end of the year, maybe November timeframe to
Okay.
release book three, then spring finish the series.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's
Yeah.
still pretty aggressive
Yeah,
time
it is. I
time
want to be
releases.
done
Yeah.
by this time next year. I want the first four book lit RPG series fixed. Then I would really like to do. I want to go back and do some polishing on book one. I've mentioned to you that
Hmm.
I've rushed my timeline on book one. I'd like to go back and polish some things. And the quick story on it is when I gave my manuscript for book one to my editor, I had he said, "Oh, you're using semicolons too much. You need to take them out." So I said, "Oh, okay."
The
So I go into
curse of the
Word.
semicolon.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I go into Word and I say, "Show me all the semicolons." Well, it was 800 something, almost 900 semicolons in my
Yeah.
document. And he says, "Yeah, all those got to come out." So I ran out of time, so it became period, capital letter.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So for those of you who are not writers in the audience, Word and Grammarly and like a lot of the grammar programs will take, especially for whatever reason, like fantasy sort of writing and action scenes and stuff, and be like, no, this sentence needs to have a semicolon in the middle of it. It's fragmented. You need to connect it with a semicolon, and that's a few of us have fallen victims to that because I mean, when you
yeah,
read a lit RPG book, you just don't. When you
yeah.
read, you don't really want to
You don't
see
want the
semicolons.
pause there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would love to go back and smooth some things in book one. But what I thought about is when I finish the four books, go back and smooth book one and then maybe do a box set and
Hmm.
get because
Like an
for my
omnibus. Yeah.
my book covers, I went out to Pfeiffer, found an artist because I didn't know what I was doing. I mean, not that
Hmm.
the artist is bad, but I didn't know what I was doing. And I went out to Fiverr and hired somebody and made my book covers. So I'd like to go back and make a nice box set, hand drawn, beautiful cover set for the whole series.
Hmm.
But those are things that I probably do at the end. So eventually, I want to come have a whole new cover series that are much more artistic,
Yeah.
and stuff.
So what I'm hearing for the collectors in the crowd is that they should get that book one edition for the first edition covers now while they're still here, because once you finish the series, you're going to
Yeah.
recover them all.
Yeah,
They'll be
exactly.
collector's
What's even
items. Yeah.
funnier is when I published the book, I forgot the back matter with the
Oh,
prologue for book two and the back matter. So
yeah.
like the first 100 books that sold do not have a back matter in the first edition. So then I went and added the back matter and stuff, and then published it up there. So now, so there's 100 books out there somewhere that are truly the first edition, and the rest of them are technically the second edition.
Yeah. Somebody needs to let Crit Happens know so you can add it to the website. So once Steve blows up and becomes famous, yeah, we're gonna know if you don't have the prologue in the back.
Yeah,
You got one of
you
those
got a first
special
edition.
books. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
Steve, I'm a fan of yours. Where should I track you? Are you on Facebook, TikTok, Patreon? What's the best way to find out when your books are coming out?
Yep. So I have Ashes of Vaeltharion on TikTok. It's at Ashes of Vaeltharion.
Mhm.
I know I should have done something simpler because everybody's like, how do you spell? But you can search for my name. Also on Instagram, same thing, Ashes of Vaeltharion. Facebook, you can just look up Steve Harthun, and I have a page just specific to my book, or my personal page will link you over to my page for my book. Also, ashesofvaeltharion.com website. You can also go out there and sign up and get the newsletter, all that. You'd mentioned the map to me.
Yeah, yeah. So
That's-
in on your website, I was doing what I normally do, which is like stalk my interviewees a little bit. I was
yep,
on your website, and you've got this like beautiful map on your website.
yep. I hired
Yeah.
a guy on Fiverr to do it.
Hmm.
So he's a map guy, and when I started talking to him, apparently people do a lot of these like tabletop games. And so he specializes in drawing these maps for tabletop games. So I explained my world to him, and he drew it and created it. And I actually have a really big version of it
Yeah,
framed,
on your wall.
framed here. Yeah,
Do you
well,
have it in the physical book? And it
I
might be
do
in the
not in
okay.
book one. Yeah, I do not. So I do want to put it in one of the books. Actually, and technically, that map is book three's material.
Okay.
You probably might notice names. You're like, "What's that? I've never seen that name
I was
before."
like, I'm sure the story's gonna get to it. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So I thought about that around book three, actually pushing it out there more, and I even thought about using it as a magnet and let people download it and stuff like that. So yeah, he did an excellent job on the map.
Yeah. It's really well done, and yeah. Yeah, I've got somebody working on a map for me, and it's wild. I had to create like a how far are these locations from each other?
It's terrible.
Like
Yeah.
it's like this is more math than I'm comfortable doing.
Yeah.
Uh
Yep.
but yeah, yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into
Yeah.
maps.
And I tried to think about in the story, because like, Tracy and them have to travel by horse or whatever, right? Because he can't fly. And so it
Mhm.
takes him 3 days to get there. And so then when I'm like doing the map, I'm like, okay, well, it took him 3 days to get here, but it took him 2 days to get here. So I can't have this closer than that.
Yeah,
And I'm
yeah.
like, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
and then it's like, okay, but it took him 3 days by walking versus, 3 days
Yeah.
by horse versus six
Correct.
days by
Wagon.
wagon, and
Yeah.
the math gets
Exactly.
wild. Yeah, yep,
Yep.
yep. I've had to do the exact same thing.
Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. The last question I've got for you for tonight, and feel free if you've got a question in the audience, go ahead and pop it in. But we're gonna be wrapping up here real soon. But Pop and I do podcast things together, and I asked people like, if you were gonna put something on Pop's TBR, if you're gonna put something on anybody's TBR, what is a book you would recommend to everybody?
I would probably say the one series that I would recommend, because I like the grim dark, right?
Hmm.
1% Life Still, love that series. I almost didn't like it in the beginning,
Hmm.
right? And I think is because the story's very abrupt, right? You got this plot going on, and there's like abrupt change, right, in the story, but it's there for a reason, right?
Yeah,
But then after I got through multiple books, it's like I
you're
love
just
that.
like more,
Yeah,
please.
it's
Yeah,
like I love this, and Daniel does the audio for it.
yeah. I was
It's
asking.
he's perfect for the role.
Yeah,
So the 1% Life Still would be my recommendation for people if you like the grim dark, type of thing we're talking about. And then the other one, if you're talking about, because is my book mainly falls in the military fantasy
Mhm.
realm, right? Is A Soldier's Life is phenomenal work too.
Soldier's Life is underrated, right? Like I think people
So
just
good,
yeah,
so
it's
good.
really good. Yep.
Yep. I
Yep.
really enjoyed A Soldier's Life. It was one that I kind of, because I like the military stuff anyway, right? And then I fumbled upon it and then started listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is really
Do you
good.
remember who the author is? I'm drawing a blank.
Shoot, I do not,
Uh,
but I
yeah,
have to. Yeah, I had to look.
yeah,
But
if you
it's
know
a
and you're in the audience, let us know.
yeah, it's a
Uh,
really good series too.
I want to say always rolls a one. Yep.
Yeah, always
Always
was.
will.
That's
Yeah.
right. I was gonna say it's not like somebody's name. He's like goes by a
Like
pen
a
name.
pseudonym. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. That's what I was thinking. It was always rolls a one. Yep. That one's really good too. It's very like Roman legionnaire and
Correct. Yeah.
the the storage power is just a lot of
It's
fun.
it's
It's
it
just
was
like
clever. It's
it
clever
is really
though.
clever. Yeah.
You know, it is the ultimate cheat. It does kind of like, come on, man. You know, I can cut a dragon's head off with a storage thing. Oh, come on, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah, but it's
it's
the power that all of the like every character gets, and it's like he
yeah.
uses it cleverly. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, then there's also stumbling up. I mean, let's not forget about
I
it.
appreciate that. I appreciate that. But yeah, definitely stumbling up is not well, it's dark, but not in the grim dark
Different
way.
kind of dark, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
different kind of dark. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Steve. I really appreciate you. If you're following along, you guys, I've got 2 more podcasts this week. Tomorrow's the Reck and Pop Pop show. We're going to be talking to Rainy Days about Goth Mommy, Bone Daddy from Royal Road. So that should be a fun conversation. And then on Wednesday, I've got CJ Estrella talking about Celestial Twins, Gemini. So tune in. It's going to be a fun month. And Steve, I can't wait to see you at Lit RPG Con
Yep.
and hang out. So thanks
Yep.
everybody.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yep.
Have a good day.
Have a good night.